The recent discoveries of cash in some properties across the country has given some boost to the anti-corruption war of the federal government. Perhaps what remains to be seen is how many of these cases are successfully prosecuted in court. The EFCC recently declared that it has secured 62 convictions in the first quarter of 2017. Among those convicted are former Adamawa State Governor Bala Ngilari, the chairman and MD of Ontario Oil and Gas, Walter Wagbasuma, and Adaugo Nadi, convicted for oil subsidy fraud, just to name a few. But there has also been a string of high-profile losses in courts, from the judgment freeing Justice Adeni Ademola to the defreezing of funds linked to patients, wife of former President Goodluck Jonathan, and monies found in the accounts of senior advocates of Nigeria, Michael Zekome. Some of these verdicts are, however, currently being appealed.
Today, I defeated the EFCC for the 7th time in 12 months.
Mr. Ozekome has called for the dissolution of the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption and for the EFCC to be guided by the provisions of the Constitution in the exercise of its duties.
EFCC, take note. You were set up by the EFCC Act of 2004. Your powers are circumscribed by the provisions of the Nigerian Constitution, which is the font et origo, the origin, the ground norm of Nigeria, and that all your acts must be guided by the provisions of Chapter 2 of the Constitution, which deals with, Chapter 4 of the Constitution, which deals with fundamental human rights.
The chairman of the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption, Professor Sage, is not fazed by the call for the dissolution of his committee. He wants the nation to look at the anti-graft war as a long-distance race which is on course.
All the lost cases have been appealed against. There's a rigorous review going on of both the presentation of the EFCC and the other agencies and the actual judgments themselves to see where the problem lies, so that they are not repeated, and where there was no problem, to ensure that the appeal succeeds. So we have to look at it generally from the point of a long-distance race. There will be setbacks now and then, but the important thing is to learn from your setbacks and work hard to ensure that they are not repeated.
There has, however, been calls for the government to devote more funding to the anti-graft war.
The anti-corruption war is something that should be transparent. So far, the problem we have had with it is the near lack of transparency. There are so many people who ought to be within the dragnet of the agency who are working freely, whose issues the government doesn't seem to be interested in.
When people say it's selective, I tell them, look, what is selective about this? If we go through this country today, out of the 170 million, I can tell you more than 100 million could be arrested tomorrow for corruption cases. So are you going to go after them? What's the number of manpower you have? So you necessarily have to be selective in the cases you go after, especially where there is a case of breach of public trust.
We have few prosecution for a number of reasons. You see, I remember there was a time when Madam Waziri invited all the senior lawyers, gave them files. All of them returned the file because the EFCC could not afford their services. The government must be ready to pay, to spend. If you want high-profile cases to be had, you go and retain good lawyers.
The fight against corruption is a noble one, but many say it must be fought without fear or favor, and government must show total commitment to the war in accordance with the rule of law. Shola Shoyeli, Channels Television News.